when I saw the PIF PGA Tour document on the athletic site last night, I just immediately started looking for explainers, and I found one because I follow Kevin Van Valkenburg on Twitter from No Laying Up. Kevin Van Valkenburg back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Kevin?
Rich, I'm good. I hope I can offer some clarity about this stuff, but if you want to talk Wheel of Fortune too, I'm up for that.
Well, well, there is a vowel in PIF, so that vowel appears to be buying, not being bought. So what did this document tell you that you didn't already know, Kevin?
Well, I think it confirmed a lot of what we had sort of heard, but it still kind of helps to see it in the language of sort of legality. That when you sort of share reporting about this stuff, and that the agreement basically is that the PGA Tour will still retain a voting interest in this stuff. Some people are just not going to believe you because they're like, the money controls everything. Of course, the Saudis run professional golf now. I think that's not specifically the case. Like, we can certainly talk about the nuances of some of those things, but what this agreement sort of spelled out is that, kind of what we had sort of understood going forward is that the giant evaluation of, what the LIV Golf is going to contribute to is this new company that's being formed that PGA Tour is going to be part of, will then allow the PIF to sort of buy into an investment in that. So let's say that it's worth $10 billion. The PIF wants to buy $2 billion into that will be their sort of, investment going forward in it. And I think just all of that was it was nice to see the actual language of it. I know that the sort of agreement was kind of floating around a bunch of places, ended up getting, pieces of it, whether it's The Athletic or the New York Times or us. But I hope that, we kind of try to look at it all right, what's the best way to explain this to our audience? Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of our approach, because it just is a big legal document dump. It's not going to do a lot of good, because most people are just going to hit you with the, I'm sorry that happened, or, grateful they did too. It's just too long, didn't read thing. So.
Well, no, and I read the document, and then I said I need an explainer. Went to you, you gave it to me. And that's one of the reasons why I immediately direct messaged you on Twitter saying, can you come and explain it to my audience? Certainly, because first blush, when I heard about this arrangement, when it was broken by CNBC, it did sound to me and felt like to me the Saudis bought golf, since they are the sole exclusive investor and have every right to decide who else gets to invest. What does it matter about the board seats is my 2 cents. So how does that sit with you when you hear that, Kevin?
I think what's the sort of nuance thing is that they're not necessarily the sole investor who can sort of deny any other investment. What they have is the right to sort of be a co-investor with anyone who kind of comes to the PGA Tour, or the PGA Tour sort of goes and says, hey, we want to buy the LPGA Tour. PIF, you have the right to sort of be a co-investor, and if you want to pass on that, you're more than welcome to. But almost certainly the PIF is going to say, yes, we would love to invest $1 billion in that, and so we're going to be partners in that going forward. So it's not like the PIF can say, no, we don't think that you should be able to invest in this thing. We're going to block that. That's not how it's going to work. And I think that the way that kind of what I would explain it to people is the Saudis are investors in a lot of things in American businesses, whether it's, Uber or Disney or Nintendo or FedEx or whatever, worldwide businesses. And they're not suddenly in control of Disney, or they're not control of FedEx or control of Uber. They're investors because they want to sort of make money. They want to have influence and have a seat on the board and sort of help determine the direction or help influence the direction of the company. And mostly, I think, help bring further investment into Saudi Arabia for various projects that they are hoping to use as part of their Vision 2030 proposal, which is to slowly kind of make the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia evolve away from being solely dependent on oil as a revenue source.
Who are the other two board members on the new co, the governing body? Who are these gentlemen that are on this board that you can explain? the politics,
So
I guess. Here.
there'll be 4 total board members, and I think that the board will grow eventually. I think it's one of the details we don't know is eventually there'll be players on the board. But the initial sort of structured thing that's laid out, Jay Monahan, as most people know, is the commissioner of the PGA Tour. But these 2 other gentlemen who kind of negotiated this deal, Jimmy Dunn and Ed Herlihy, are 2 of the sort of biggest mergers and acquisition finance people in the United States. They're both members of Augusta National. Jimmy Dunn is the president of Seminole Golf Club, which is sort of one of the premier golf clubs in Florida. They're kind of these big movers and shakers in the world of finance and also golf. Jimmy Dunn, as some of the audience may remember, his firm was in the Twin Towers when 9/11 happened, and basically lost all of his co-workers. He was out trying to qualify for the mid-am that day, and so he happened to not be in the office. And so his kind of story has kind of been connected to 9/11 for a long time because his mentor and his best friend died in the Twin Towers. Ed Hurley is just one of the sort of, he's the chairman of essentially the most profitable law firm in the entire world, really, in New York. And so these are guys who kind of work out these kind of mergers and acquisitions all the time as part of their work. And so they happen to sort of be, policy advisors on the PGA Tour. I think you could sort of say that, they've been there for roughly 6 months or so, Ed a little longer, like a year. And I think that essentially what happened was that they just were sort of tasked either by Jay Monahan or by, some people kind of think that since they're both members of Augusta, that maybe Augusta was like, hey, man, can you get us out of this lawsuit? Who knows if that's true or not. But that to sort of settle a deal like this, to kind of make this legal dispute between between LIV and the PGA Tour kind of go away. And they were the ones who kind of negotiated this and then brought Jay to the table to sort of help finalize it once they got close.
And so thus Jay trusts them. And so this is why when we hear from Jimmy Dunn, hey, the Saudis didn't buy golf. And as a matter of fact, if anybody gives me hardcore proof that, the Saudis had anything to do with 9/11, I'll fight them myself, Mm-hmm. And so does that mean that these 2 gents, along with Jay Monahan, are in fact proof that the PGA Tour does in fact maintain control of its own destiny and its own business because they have 3 of the 4 board seats, and it doesn't matter that His Excellency has the 4th from Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
I think that is the most likely reading of the situation. Now, anybody who's watched Succession can sort of tell you that, board seats over time can sort of, change hands, can become sort of malleable in terms of, things being offered to various people. If you studied what happened with Uber, some of that sort of happened as well. Its original founder kind of got moved aside when he wasn't necessarily on board with what the board wanted. But I think that for Ed and Jimmy's case, their reputation within the world of golf is pretty important to them. You don't get to be a member at Augusta or at Seminole or various other places without having sort of an important kind of, I think, reputation within the world of golf. And I think the last thing that they would want was to be seen as sort of, you sold out this American institution. I don't even know, there's been no discussion about what their firms are even benefiting from this anyway. And I think it's almost likely that they're sort of doing this work kind of, pro bono just for the sort of good of golf. And so I think I think it's very unlikely, certainly in the near future, that they've kind of given, I honestly don't think, and this is a little bit of conjecture on my part, that that's really ultimately the Saudis' goal. They just want to be involved in investment the same way that they're sort of involved in the Premier League or involved in F1 or involved in various other sporting entities around the world. They're not looking to sort of dominate and sort of have control. They just kind of want to be partners because they see it as not only a good investment financially, but as an investment sort of in their future of their country.
Well, it's difficult for me to grasp that, to be honest with you. Kevin Van Valkenburg, the editorial director of No Laying Up right here on the Rich Eisen Show. It's difficult for me to wrap my arms around that, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of golf fans and sports fans especially since did it appear the LIV Tour was created with exactly that in mind, to go and compete and dominate and beat the PGA Tour. I mean, they conducted themselves in a, what's the word for it? Would it be proper to say rapacious manner, to go after Tiger? I mean, Jack. I mean, like, they went after everybody in the most damaging way for the PGA Tour. So now we're all buddies because they got the seat at the table, and part of the seat at the table does appear in this document, Kevin, is that the LIV Tour, whether it lives or dies, is now in the hands of Ed Hurley, Jimmy Dunn, and Jay Monahan. Really? Like, that really just happened?
Well, I think what you have to kind of understand is that the Saudis initially came to the PGA Tour like 2 years ago and sort of said, we would love to have a meeting with you because we have like $2 billion that we'd love to invest. And the PGA Tour sort of brass wouldn't even take the meeting, that they were basically like, no, we don't want any part of this. Like, we don't want to have foreign investment. And I think that was sort of a naive reading of this. I mean, hindsight's pretty easy. Like, I doubt that, even people like me would have been like, yeah, that's a great idea in the initiating, because this was like right after the Khashoggi stuff when they sort of did this. But that's always kind of been their ultimate goal, was to just be a part of it. Now, when the PGA Tour basically shut them out, I think that, and they hired Greg Norman to sort of be the front-facing person of this, I think it was like kind of all in on like, all right, what can we do to, basically like call them out and say we're in this for real. We're going to throw a ton of money at this. I don't know how much of kind of this is like them ultimately trying to save some face. I mean, they live, as much as they've sort of pumped money into it and stuff, has not been any kind of financial success. They can't get sponsorships. They've talked about selling these franchises, teams. No one's stepping up to sort of pay the kind of amount of money that they want. They're barely, on television at all. They're being preempted in tons of different markets. They're not able to they haven't been able to sign any kind of big names this last year. So on some level, you could sort of look at it like, all right, they tried and they sort of reached a point of like almost success, but ultimately like didn't work out. And so I think in order to sort of save a little bit of face, and also for all of the lawsuit stuff to go away, once they kind of lost the lawsuit in sort of the Ninth Circuit Court that said that Yasser El-Rumayyan, the chairman of the PIF, would have to be deposed, I think that was a big red flag for them. And they're like, all right, how do we get out of this? Because that is not something that we've ever had to sort of face in all of our other investments in American companies. They do not want to reveal a lot of stuff that they would have to sort of reveal if they sat for a deposition. And I think that was kind of a way to be like, all right, we maybe got out of our skis a little bit here, and how do we make this kind of, a win for both parties and making it go away?
Editorial director, no laying up, Kevin Van Valkenburg here on the Rich Eisen Show. So let's talk about next steps and what this document might reveal. Is LIV dead? I mean, as a doorknob, or what?
Yeah, I think, you can never sort of say completely like, yeah, of course it's gone, of course it's done. I mean, my instinct would be that it is unlikely that LIV will continue beyond 2023.
Right.
It's certainly beyond 2024. Who knows kind of exactly how attached to the future of LIV Yasser El-Rumayyan is. I think what the document says is that there's going to be, an analysis, a data-based analysis about the future of LIV going forward. Now, anybody who's sort of followed this stuff is kind of understands that LIV isn't making any money. In fact, they've lost massive amounts of money. And so in the language is saying we'll make a good faith assessment on the benefits of team golf in general. I think that some kind of team golf thing will survive. And so whether, it sort of morphs into something else where, Dustin Johnson still gets a team, or Brooks Koepka still gets a team, and then eventually like Tiger Woods has a team and Rory McIlroy has a team, I could see that sort of being part of it going forward. I do not think that LIV, as it's currently structured, will exist at all sort of competing against the PGA Tour. It's just silly to think that like the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan or whomever ended up in that chair, if Jay isn't coming back from this health scare that he's had, would want the PGA Tour to compete against itself for audience, for purses, for sponsors or anything like that. So I'd say most likely not. But, there's other people out there who believe for sure that Yasser Al-Rumayyan is so invested in this in this entity moving forward that, maybe he could sort of say, look, we'll throw another $2 billion into this if this is kept around. Well,
and I'd imagine for those LIV Tour players that do have Yasser's phone number, a few texts have gone in and say, hey, what's the plan on getting us back our tour card here? Because I'm looking at this document and I don't see too much in there that lays out exactly how that's going to happen. And that is a huge aspect of this in order for everybody to get back together and play golf in the same organization. Kevin, what do you got for me on that one?
Yeah. So what we do know is that LIV can't recruit any more players basically through the end of 22. So if you're one of these people who follows this stuff on Twitter and you still see rumors about like John Rahm might go to LIV or Patrick Cantlay might go to LIV, that's not going to happen until the end of 23. Mm-hmm. I think that it is very murky about how those players will be able to sort of apply for reinstatement and who will sort of make up the committee that decides what they sort of have to do to come back. Is it that they have to go start on the Corn Ferry Tour, that they've lost their status? Is it that they're not eligible for equity that might be divided up amongst the players in this new sort of, investment, this new business, NewCo, what they're calling right now? I don't think it's likely that they can actually fine players. I think that was sort of something thrown around a while, like, oh, you might have to pay back some of your stuff. I doubt that's going to be happening. I think that it's more likely that just won't be, eligible for certain bonuses. And I think that what's probably almost a certainty is that not all players who left for LIV will be treated equally. I think if I were Phil Mickelson and I wanted to play on the PGA Tour, which I don't know that he does anymore, I would be kind of nervous about that ever happening, because if you're one of the players who filed a lawsuit against the PGA Tour and the members, and they had to hire lawyers and sort of had to do their own depositions and be dragged into sort of this stuff, I think they're going to be pretty bitter about someone who left, got a bunch of money, and basically has been calling out the sort of people over and over again and kind of antagonizing everyone. If I were Ian Poulter or Lee Westwood, I might say, yeah, you know what? I don't know that I'm ever going to get to play PGA Tour golf again. But if you're Brooks Koepka or Dustin Johnson or Cam Smith or somebody who's kind of gone about their business and hasn't tried to pick fights and hasn't sort of joined the lawsuit, I think eventually you will see them back. And what that kind of path is, I don't know. But I think that, the most of the players probably want them back for the sort of betterment of the whole product.
And then, of course, the whole idea whether this deal gets to, a shot to go through or stays intact. Big date coming up on July 11th, the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and ranking member Ron Johnson of Wisconsin has invited Jay Monahan, Yasser Al-Rumayyan, and Greg Norman to appear in front of that committee. I imagine His Excellency has no intention of appearing in front of the United States Senate. What about everything else here? How does this document stand up? Or, unless I shouldn't put words in Yasser's mouth here, or his hand raised. I'm just wondering, what do you got for me there on that?
I think that's the biggest unknown of all, is what the sort of, congressional oversight and the Justice Department oversight will kind of feel about this agreement. There's a lot of people that feel like initially, and certainly based on, Jay Monahan said something afterwards of it was a chance for us to take a competitor off the board, that there's no way that would pass regulatory muster, that these two, entities that were previously, fighting in court over the idea of whether they're a monopoly, that them joining forces would certainly make them a monopoly. And there's obviously a lot of tension around the politics of it. The PGA Tour were the people who brought the 9/11 families into the sort of discussion and kind of used them as an emotional, sort of prop to hope to rally their players and their support against, LIV. And now, that's upset a lot of people in Congress who really don't care about the golf future of it. They want to sort of make it clear that they're the sort of ultimate kind of deciders in all this. And so you're right. I don't suspect that Yasser Al-Rumayyan would sit and answer questions in front of Congress. And whether that further enrages people who are sort of going to have to kind of approve this stuff was kind of fascinating to see it play out. I think that the document here that we sort of saw is purposely vague for those reasons, because they don't have a lot of the details. You know, even like today, the players are seeing some of the details for the first time. So it's kind of fascinating to think that like some of this stuff the players didn't even know while the media was still getting a look at it, and they're ultimately the ones who have to vote to kind of help it move forward with the policy board. So all of that is like, you know, the Rumsfeld thing of like known unknowns.
Yeah.
Like that's definitely a known unknown going forward, is how ultimately, you know, hard Congress is going to sort of push this investigative stuff, because ultimately, like, the United States wants to play nice with the Saudis. So there's a reason that like Tony Blinken was just in Riyadh, the Secretary of State. And so they're not, you know, there's going to be pressure from the administration, from other members of Congress who are pushing back on this stuff to not, you know, sort of block this deal, because ultimately our country is still, you know, beholden to oil in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate, most important piece of information is not known right now, which is the valuation of the PGA Tour and the LIV Tour that spits out a number that the Saudis are going to put on the table. Like, we don't even know that number. We're assuming it starts with a 2, it might be starting with a 3 in billions, and then just, you know, there's a couple of names that are left blank, right, for a crucial committee that's being formed to have both the LIV and PGA Tour interface, right? Am I not mistaken? As well?
No, you're correct. And also, let's not, like I mentioned this before, but like we don't even know if Jay Monahan is actually going to be around to be the commissioner of this whole thing, or the CEO, I guess. You know, that,
right.
You know, we know that Yasser is going to be the chairman, but you know, he's also the chairman of Newcastle United. He's the chairman. You know, he basically runs Aramco, which is the state-run oil company. He's involved in a lot of things. And so it's not like Yasser can step in and say like, all right, well, I'll run the day-to-day operations of Newco. Like, that's not going to happen. He has too many other sort of things going on here. So if Jay's not able to sort of continue going forward, or if the players are in too much of an uproar and they don't want him, you know, who's going to step in and take that position? I doubt it's going to be like Jimmy Dunn or Ed Hurley. So they're going to have to find someone likely from outside the organization to do it. And what does that mean going forward? Like, is, you know, that person going to sort of evaluate things the same way that Jay might? It's all going to play out, I think, over the next 6 months or a year. Like, we're just sort of in the beginning of this, much less. And if let's say the agreement falls apart, like, what does that mean? You know, in terms of like this agreement says they can't sue each other over again, that the lawsuits are done. But, you know, if 6 months from now the Saudis are like, all right, well, that didn't work out, and we're glad that we're not being sued anymore, but we're still going to go and try to sign John Rahm, like, that will sort of upend things again.
Wow. All right, last one for you, Kevin. I know we've spoken a while, but conversations like this and subject matters that are difficult to understand, I'm mandated to say, did I ask everything? Is there something I didn't ask that I should know, Kevin?
I think you pretty much nailed it. I mean, one thing that was sort of in the document that we were a little bit surprised by is that this agreement that they signed was essentially a week before they went on CNBC and talked about it.
And not well. They didn't talk about it well at all. Like, they didn't have a duck in a row, man. It was crazy.
So they had a week to get their stuff straight, and they couldn't do it, which I don't think speaks, you know, particularly well to the kind of the rollout and the messaging of this stuff. I think they've been surprised by some of the anger. I know they've been surprised by some of the anger that the players are facing. And so, you know, the messaging is a pretty important part of a merger, and especially when you have a policy board that has to vote to approve this kind of stuff. And, you know, you have Rory McIlroy, who's been sort of like your biggest, you know, weapon in this for the PGA Tour, said he feels like a sacrificial lamb, and he sort of was blindsided by the whole thing. There's a lot that's still kind of complicated going forward.
Kevin, thanks for the time. Great explainer on your site. No laying up, and then of course for the time here. Look for more of my calls. Thanks again, sir. Great stuff.
Anytime, Rich.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's Kevin Van Valkenburg. Everyone, check out No Laying Up. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.